Hey everyone, happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Free Real Estate Advice Fridays. This is episode 28. Couple things I wanted to talk about this week. This is a late edition. What time is it? 4:10. I had I had a lunch meeting today and then I had a buyer's consultation. So as I said, this is always kind of been a floating schedule because Friday is not a slow day for me. In fact, it's a lot of showings and stuff. So I try to do these when I can. I figure not that many people really are upset if I'm not there at noon. So here we are at 4:00. So hope everyone's having a good week. Weekend's coming up. I know this is Mother's Day weekend. So Sunday, I'm personally off. Not a lot of showings this weekend. But we have more buyers. I always kind of update you on my big board here. So I have 6 listings going in various states, and I'm up to 18 buyers. Just continuing as, a business that I always focus on listings. This is extremely out of whack. This is just kind of a indication of what we're dealing with as far as inventory goes. And I love this job and I love doing what I do. But when you're very buyer heavy as an agent, it's tough because it's hard to get an offer accepted these days. So, this is how I feed my family, and it's big stakes for me. So it's not easy getting offers accepted. I would say, personally, I've had, what I would call very good success at getting those offers accepted, but it still can be quite stressful for not only my buyers, but also myself, because this is how I make my living. So anyway, I've been having more and more conversations with buyers lately, and something that I picked up on this week that was asked of me, and I'm trying to bring my current conversations into these broadcasts, because I think the questions that I get asked, I'm often asked many times, and the one that I want to talk about this week is something that was mentioned to me 3 times this week. I literally just stopped having the conversation with some new clients, and I had this conversation with an existing client earlier, and I had the same conversation with one of my other clients on Monday. So it's a conversation I've had 3 times this week. So I think anything that's, multiple people are asking me is worth talking in this format. So that thing I want to talk about is Craig, our house is still going crazy over asking price, because if so, we don't want to get involved in that. So this is a loaded question, obviously. So the easiest way to answer it is, well, what area are you looking in? If you're looking in Middlesex, Somerset, Union County, yes, houses are still going crazy above asking price. I think what a lot of us are finding unofficially is that we are getting less offers. So you go back a year and a half and you throw an open house, we would have, we could have 20 offers would be pretty common. Of those 20 offers, you could probably take 5 right off the bottom. They're just not fully qualified. They have home sale contingencies or whatever. And if you're in a 20 offer situation, there's very few times where you're going to take a home sale contingent offer. Then, you get another 12 that are just poorly written offers where I have to call the agent back and ask certain questions that aren't clear in the offer or whatever it may be. And then you have your top tier, which are your, 3 or 4 offers that are beautifully written, solid terms. All of the concerns have been addressed, namely in this market 2, which is inspections and appraisals. And out of those 4, we can generally make our choice. What's happening now? Let me take a step back and talk about those appraisals. So, the popular talking point in the media and at the national level, because, a lot of these reports are coming out of some of the hottest markets in the country. So let's talk about Myrtle Beach or Nashville, certain parts of Nashville. These are red hot markets. This is where the big storylines are coming from. That's obviously not going to be indicative of what's happening in Hunterdon County, but we do still have some things happening here. So instead of getting our 20 offers, we're getting 4 or 5. And, at the lower price points, that's going to be higher than 4 or 5 because there's just more buyers. If you have a higher price point, obviously there's just less buyers that are qualified. We have rising interest rates, so people don't have quite as much money to play with. What we're finding, though, at the smaller level is what we do have a lot of are people that have just been looking and looking and looking, have put in multiple offers. They're frustrated. They're tired of the process. They need a place to live, and they're coming over the top. So instead of getting 20 offers and like 4 that are like solid, we're getting like 4 or 5 offers with one that's just outrageous. And that's not every listing. It's many of them, but not every listing. We also have houses that sit on the market for a month, and that's very common too. And I'm going to show you some real stats so you can see what's going on here in Hunterdon. So, I would just say if you're hearing that, if you have a relative that's telling you that, or you have a coworker, or you just hear it, at a social, outing or whatever, that's a big statement. It's not a blanket statement that you can just go with and say, yeah, no, I heard that too. It's impossible to get a house right now. Obviously, it's not impossible. Like I said, this is how I make my living. I'm still selling about 30 a year. So houses are definitely still selling. And as much as I'd like to say it's 30 listings I had, and I had a great time because all of my 30 listings got, 10 to 20 offers. That's not the reality. Because of the lower inventory, I'm taking on more buyers than ever. So, I think last year I did about 40% sellers, which was actually a very good year for me for listings. But this year I'm way out of whack. As I said earlier, I have 18 buyers and 6 listings. So, people are still buying houses. It all happens much faster. It's usually much more emotional, which can be problematic in negotiations and whatnot. But there's a lot to that conversation. So listen, minimally, if you're thinking about doing it, at least book a buyer's consultation with me. I mean, I can actually look up the towns you're looking in. I can tell you, and we do this all the time now because it's necessary. We can look up what's been happening in that town. Has everything been going over listing price, or is that in fact not a reality? And I'm going to show you an example of that today. So stepping back to what's going on today is we are getting those 4 or 5 offers. I just had one recently in Bethlehem Township here in Hunterdon County. Beautiful house, like absolutely top of the line, great price point. Well, what do I mean by great price point? So it was, 900,000 ish. And they had 2 offers. But the agent was very transparent with me and said, look, one of these 2 offers is essentially a slam dunk. They've waived most of what you can waive. They came way over asking. They have plenty of cash in the bank, which means they can cover any appraisal gaps. So, just so you know, and that's appreciated from a business standpoint that I'm told that, because there's no reason for them to lie to me on that. Shouldn't say there's no reason. There would be some unethical reasons to do that, but I think for the most part, we don't see a lot of that in the industry, but certainly not in Hunterdon County, especially when they're agents that I've worked with before and I know very well. So, in this particular example, we decided not to put an offer in, but as is always the case, I told the agent, please let me know if anything happens, because the other aspect of this market that you're not hearing about is those crazy offers that are getting accepted are falling apart all the time because people are promising the world in their offer. And here in New Jersey, we have an attorney review period of 3 to 5 days. And during attorney review, they go to their attorney and say, okay, we want to buy this house. We've waived the appraisal gap and we've waived inspections. And the attorney says, whoa. You sure you know what you're doing? And then lays out the scenarios in which and why, obviously, those things are risky. And then the buyers say, ooh, no, I guess we hadn't thought about that. And then the agent calls the listing agent back and says, or they don't get a call back. They just hear from the attorney that says, the buyers have reconsidered their inspection waivers and they're not going to do that anymore. Well, as a listing agent, sometimes we have to say, well, that's why we took your offer. So now sometimes we have to back out of that offer. And, this generally happens within like 10 days of the offer being accepted. And then the house is available again. So there's a lot of merit in getting your offer in and being the second best offer and just keeping in touch with the listing agent. Say, hey, just checking in. Is everything, still holding together? And I've had many deals over the past 2 years that were exactly that. You get the call back from the listing agent, or sometimes I'm the listing agent and I'm calling that second offer and saying, hey, you guys had a great offer. We just had a better one, but that better one fell apart very quickly. Are you guys still interested? So And that's how people get houses nowadays. I mean, that's one of the ways that you will get the house that you wanted. So it's complicated out there. It's if you're able to put it this way, if you're able to describe the market conditions of the real estate market as a non-professional, I can describe it not in a sentence, but I can describe the market. Obviously, I'm a professional, but if you're not a professional, you're just you're talking around a social gathering of some sort, and someone gives you a one sentence hot take on the market, it's probably not a good assessment of the current market. So that's the whole point today, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. Listen, the thing that is required in this market, and now we have this fun curveball of the interest rates are rising. So I think to some degree, I think that could alleviate some of this because people are obviously just going to have less money to throw around. But it all remains to be seen. I think a lot of this is very fluid, and there are as many people out there saying, "Look, this is the new normal. This is how it's going to be from now on," which is not very exciting to us realtors because we don't want to have to take buyers and to show them 30 homes and constantly get rejected, or at least constantly be in bidding wars. Even when you win a bidding war, it's still very stressful. Early in my career, I was never waiting for these calls to hear how the highest and best, which is the deadline for putting offers in on multiple offer situations, waiting for that phone call. That was never a thing early in my career. You just put in your offer, and within a day, you'd hear back, and you either got it or you didn't get it. Now it's very different. It's like a sweepstakes. So now that being said, there's a lot of merit to just picking a buying agent like myself that is strategic and deliberate, and trusting that we'll get you the best chance we can, as opposed to going straight to the listing agent. I've talked about that many times in here. Terrible strategy, in my opinion. Bouncing from realtor to realtor because you think one's not finding you something. Now, listen, there could be a reason that you should pick a new realtor, but that reason isn't because they're not finding you something, because we're all picking from the same pool. The reason would be that you think that they may not have the ability to put in a great offer. If they can't talk to you for 25 straight minutes about what their strategy is for putting in an offer, you might want to consider a different route, because it's hard. It really is hard to get an offer accepted. And the way that I do it, and the way my colleagues do it that are high performing realtors, is very, very thought out and structured, and something that we've worked on and deliberated over and built up. It's not something that is taught in real estate class when you get your license. It's not something that someone that sells 3 or 4 homes a year is going to be in tune with. And it's nothing against those realtors. It's just that it's dog eat dog out there, and if you're not really tuned into what's going on, then it could be challenging. And I know this because I coach and mentor a lot of agents and help them put in offers, and help them understand what sort of things listing agents are looking for, because a lot of agents don't have the listing experience, which is so important, because if you've listed homes and you've taken 20 offers, you get to see how 20 different agents submit their offers, and you get to say things like, "Oh, wow, that's a really smart way to put the offer in," or, "Oh my God, I wonder if this person's clients know how terrible this offer is and how flawed it is and how many red flags it is." So, all of those things are major, major considerations in picking a realtor. And, from my point of view, I think people make that choice kind of willy nilly. I mean, minimally, do as much research on picking your realtor as you do buying a product on Amazon. We all read the reviews, at least read the reviews. Don't be afraid to ask for references. I offer references all the time. I've actually never had, I've had one time where someone took me up on references from past clients. So, there's just a lot to it. You can't just say the market's crazy and everyone's putting in crazy money over asking and not getting it. It's simply not the whole story. It's far from it. It's actually a very bad take on the situation. So, let's take a look at some numbers. I'm going to share my screen here. So again, as I do almost every week, let me just rearrange here a little bit. If anyone, I do see quite a few people watching, which I very much appreciate. Viewership has gone up and up and up, and I really, really appreciate that. Wherever you're watching, you're like, what is he talking about? There's one or two people here. This is broadcast to many, many different places at the same time. So I can see the number. I can't see who they are. So if I know you, say hi. If you have any questions while I'm doing this, please just put them in the comments. Would love to get some live questions. I've been doing this much more where I'm taking things that come up during the week from my clients and just, putting them on here. But if you have any real-time questions, please feel free. That was kind of the spirit of this whole thing. And in the beginning, I did get a lot of those questions, but lately I haven't. So if you have any questions you want to ask me in real time, that's just like a general real estate question, or it could be specific. If it's too specific, I'll just take it offline. But please feel free to post anything in the comments where I can see it, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can. So I'm going to share my screen now, and this will be a little hard to see because it's an Excel spreadsheet, but I will kind of guide you through it. So the question was asked of me today, this morning, about Pittstown, New Jersey. So Pittstown's where I live, Franklin Township, aka Franklin Township. Pittstown, so Hunterdon County. Context again, Pittstown's our post office. So a lot of places show up within a Pittstown zip code that are not geographically Pittstown. It could be Alexandria Township, Union Township, Franklin Township. Some parts of Bethlehem Township are all Pittstown mailing address. So I'm actually focusing on geographically Franklin Township. This is North Hunterdon Sending District. Generally higher price points. I'm looking at the range now of things. These are all things that have sold in the past year. So peak of the market. So I'm looking, just taking a quick breeze. On the low end, 199, and this is list price, not sale price. On the low end, 199 on up to 2.26 million. So over the past year, these are all the houses that have sold in Franklin Township. There is 39 of them, 38 of them. Average difference in sales price. Now, if I had someone live here, I'd say, based on what we're talking about here, this talking point of everything's going crazy over asking price, I'll give you the people that are watching now a minute to think. What do you think the average difference between listing price and sales price, final sales price, is on a listing in Franklin Township, New Jersey? If you go by the talking point, the popular talking point, I don't know, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100,000. That's the average. The average difference between listing price and sales price in Franklin Township over the past year, a very desirable area, North Hunterdon School District, great houses, a range of houses from ranches to big custom colonials, acreage, the whole 9 yards. The average difference is negative 6,200. And I didn't share my screen yet. Let me do that now. I just noticed. Okay, there we go. And how's that look? There we go, full screen. Let's zoom in a little bit. All right. So this column C here that I'm showing, I fully anticipate that you will not be able to read this, especially if you're on a phone. Forget about it. It looks like nothing. But looking at this for anyone that's watching on a large monitor like I am. But I'll just kind of talk you through it. But column C here is the difference between listing price and sales price. So for Franklin, New Jersey, to repeat this point, over the past year, the average difference in sales price between listing price and sales price is negative 6,200. That means the average transaction is 6,000 under asking price. So make sure you understand that when you're having people say these things, because believe you me, I get this all the time everywhere I go. Oh my God, I hear it's crazy out there. People are going nuts and offering crazy over asking price offers. Yeah, it does happen, but it's not the norm. It's definitely the exception. So let's drill into this a little bit. Let's go to the highest over asking. Now there's going to be a big one here. And then let's look up the listing. So I see a couple here. So I'm gonna go ahead and set the bar here. So I'm gonna say if it's 20,000 over asking, that's pretty common outside of Hunterdon. 20,000 over asking is like people don't even really, it doesn't even really move the needle anymore. People are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And for the most part, the value's there. I mean, the value is whatever someone's willing to pay for it. So there's appraisal value and then there's market value, and market value is high now because everyone needs houses. There's definitely a national shortage of houses. So I see one on here that's exceptional. We're going to take a look at the listing and see if we can figure out what happened there to give you an idea of what types of houses this applies to. So I see one here that closed back in August of 21 for 96,000 over asking. I see it's 15 acres. Let's take a look at this listing. Let's see here. 96,000 over asking. Here's our number. Grab that. I wonder if this is interesting if you're sitting on your end of the spectrum. I hope it's somewhat interesting. All right. And you guys get to watch me maneuver all my screens here. All right, so let me bring in the MLS and let's take a look at this listing, see if we can get some context here. Because listen, that's what all these conversations are missing. It's the context. So let's take a look at the context. First of all, I can tell you right now, just based on the listing number, that this is okay, let's see. So it's an as-is sale, okay? It is an estate. How did they pick their listing price? It's not easy, especially in Franklin Township. And again, this is all part of this conversation, right? So picking a listing price is so challenging in this market because it's so unpredictable. So in this case, whatever their logic was for their listing price, it just turned out that the market bared more buyers than they thought it would. And that's fine. So this is the house. It looks like solid shape. Now, here's where you see that there is a lot to this one and why this would be very desirable for someone who, basically decided, oh my God, that's the house, I got to have it, which is why people go way over asking. It's tons of acreage, 15 acres. Now, there's not a ton of houses around with 15 acres. In Pittstown, we have a fair amount, but there's not a ton of them. The house is in pretty solid shape. From the outside, it looks beautiful. Maybe a little dated inside. There's only a couple pictures. One outbuilding, 15 acres. So for whatever reason, this one went over 96,000. It's interesting on this one because it's an as-is sale, which means there's no inspection, negotiation, or anything. What you see is what you get, and there will be no considerations from the estate. They could have priced it low, anticipating that could be problematic for people. I always kind of tell people, if you're going to list a house as is, because everyone wants to do it, and I say, if you're going to do that, you might as well just take 10% off the top, because that's essentially what, and I'm talking around an average price point, like 400,000 or 500,000. It's going to cost you to do that because you're just taking all the risk that you currently have and just passing it on to the buyer. So, the buyer's not going to pay a premium if they are taking on all this risk. So that's, generally speaking, not a good strategy. That being said, there are times when it's necessary because maybe the sellers don't have the money to address whatever it is. This is an estate, so it kind of makes sense that they don't want to, it could be, children of the deceased that just don't have the money to put in a septic system or whatever the case may be. And I was saying to yesterday, like, what are we really talking about? Like, if you're buying like a 650,000, this is all very general, and please don't take this as the gospel. But if you're buying a $600,000 house and you're going to buy it as is, there's probably, again, I'm just kind of throwing numbers out there, but there's probably like a 95% chance that the absolute most risk that you have on buying that house is like 200,000. So if you're a person with like tons of money and you just love the property, especially in this case where it's 15 acres, and you're willing to take on that risk because you have a bunch of money and you'll take care of it. If it's a septic or whatever, you'll just take care of it. Then, that's a good way to get a house. Most of us are not that person. We don't have 200,000 in the bank, so you don't want to take on that risk. But it's not like, there's exceptions here. So I said like 95%, right? Well, the 5% chance is there's a tank buried in the ground and it's leaking oil and it's gotten into the aquifer and it's on the neighbor's property and everything else. And then now you're in for, big money. Still, the chances of that passing like $200,000 are like, I mean, I can tell you, I've never had anything like that happen in my career, and I've sold, roughly 100 homes. So, it is what it is, but you're still passing that risk on. So, but most of us don't have 200,000 in the bank. So, generally not a good strategy for buyers or sellers, but it does happen. So here's an example of a house that went for 96,000 over asking. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Let's see. So that was one, 96,000 over asking. Let's see what else we got here. So here's one, 42,000 over asking, but the sales price is $1 million. So we'll take a quick peek at it. But, again, this is like 42,000 out of $1 million is like a relatively small, this is a very old listing too, relatively small percentage over asking, relatively. But that would, make a little bit of sense, obviously. All right, let's see what that one looks like. Must be really irritating watching me navigate all this. Okay. So this is the one that went 42,000 over asking. Very old listing. This one was sold back in, let's see. This one was sold back in, closed on about a year ago, May 19th, 2021. I know this house very well. Beautiful house. Really, really cool house. So someone saw this house and was like, I'm not losing this house. I'm guessing if they bought $1 million house that they had some money to work with, and they said, we'll come in 42,000 over the top and we'll get our house. Super cool house, super unique. Here's the overhead. You got the pool. It's a very modern house. Let's see if we have better pictures. And I know this is probably kind of small on some of your screens. But as you can see, it's beautifully appointed. I mean, this is resort living in a $1 million beautiful modern house that is truly unique for Hunterdon County. 3-car garage, clean lines, the whole 9 yards. This house went for $42,000 over asking, $1 million. Does that seem crazy to anyone? I would hope not. That's not too crazy to me. I mean, this is a one-of-a-kind house. I would live in this house in a second. I don't have $1 million. Okay, so that's another example, right? So that's 42,000 over asking. Let's take a look at another one. 61,000. Now this is interesting. This is, oh wait, is this the one we just looked at? No, this is a different one. 61,000 over asking at a lower price point. Let's see what happened here. Keep in mind, I'm talking about 5 houses out of 40 sales. So this is what I'm saying is, it's, the talking point that we were talking about, everything's going over asking. You can see now what I mean by, well, that's not the whole story. All right, let's look at this one. This one went 42,000 over asking. So interesting. This is another, let's see here. Very minimal description, so I'm not really sure. Let's take a look. All right, so, it would be safe to say there was probably some deferred maintenance here because there's no landscaping out front. Is obviously a lot of control. It doesn't look too bad, though. It needs carpets. That's definitely an original kitchen. Baseboard heating. It's got the wallpaper. Yeah, it's interesting because this one definitely needs a lot of work. Yeah, I don't know. On this one, I guess I just kind of priced it too low. It's on 3.5 acres. It is a 4-bedroom home. It says right in the listing that it's very deceiving, that a drive-in won't suffice. You need to go in and see that it opens up quite a bit. Very common in this area, kind of a raised ranch. Is it a raised ranch? It's just, they just list it as a ranch, but so, there's various reasons that it might be listed lower. They just were anticipating that they just need to drive more people to actually show up and do a showing. Very often not a bad strategy, which, obviously it worked out for them. If they had a strategy of listing it at $389 and then it went for $450, then that's good for them and good for their sellers. But okay, so that's that one. It's interesting that they, two out of the three needed work, but still went over asking. All right, let's take a look and see if we can find another one. That's the one we just did. And I see some 20s and 30s. The 20s at a price point of 660,000. 30s at a price point of 825. They went for 855. I'm gonna guess each of those are on big acres, 9 acres and 7 acres respectively. Let's take a look at some of these houses and see what they look like. And hit me up in the comments if you think this is interesting or you think this is boring. This broadcast, I'm always reluctant to call it a podcast. This broadcast is completely fly by the seat of my pants. So I came up with this idea on the way here. Taraway, awesome road. I love this road. Right off Hogback Road. Contemporary house. I remember this house very well. I had a client that wanted to see it. So pool that needs work. Inside looks pretty solid. Carpets could use some updating, and there's some dated. Wow, look at that. A lot of custom work, which is cool. Again, I think someone probably just fell in love with this house. There probably was a couple other offers, and they just decided, you know what, this is our house. This is the one that we must have. We'll do the work. It could have been someone that has the ability to do the work, and they said, you know what, we'll pay the little bit of extra, and it's our house. But it's only 21,000 over asking. It's nothing crazy. It's on 660. What's that, like 2%? Let's see. 3%. So 3% over asking. Let's take a look at that next one. 30,000 over asking. This one's at 800,000. So again, we're talking about very small percentages here. It's even smaller percentage than the last one. So 1.5%, 2%. And let's see. A lot of dead air on this broadcast. I hope you guys don't mind that. All right, so this one is on Laurelton Trail. This is actually the same street as that modern one I just showed you. This one, I remember this house very well, of course, 7 acres, beautiful house, beautiful house. So again, 825 listing price, probably one of the nicer listings in the area. It was on the market only for 3 weeks, which is pretty low. Beautiful custom house, marble work, modern kitchen, beam ceiling. You're looking at this with me. Don't you think that there's a good chance this is going to go over asking? Isn't there? Don't you think there's a good chance that there's going to be multiple offers? And once there's multiple offers, one of them is surely to say, all right, well, let's pump in an extra, whatever. In this case, $20,000 really isn't much. This is a beautiful home, beautiful, beautiful home. Yeah, I remember this one very well. So, homes like this, you're not surprised when it goes for, I think, what did we say, 30 over asking? So, all right. So that's that. Yeah, that was 30 over asking. So I don't really see any major ones. There's another one for 75 at another low price point. So I'm not going to look at all these. I am curious about this one. So this was 75 over asking at a low price point. And this is probably not the best example because, a lot of these lower price listings are, they can't find comps. The house needs work. It's actually just really hard to set a price, but then the market bears the actual price. So that's why they go over asking price. It's not deliberate necessarily by a realtor. It's just, the way things shake out. So it was listed for $375. It was on the market for a little over 2 weeks. It sold for $450, 1.5 acres on Sydney Road, very well-known road here in Petstown. Brick house, looks in solid shape, reasonably updated, new kitchen. Someone fell in love with it and they came over the top. That's a pretty low listing price. So I will tell you that in other markets, I always reference Morris County because as long as I've been practicing real estate, Morris County was always doing this, is they do choose to price low. And that choice is based on the fact that they're going to get more buyers through the door. They're hoping for that one person that falls in love with it, and then they bid it up. It's definitely a strategy. It's definitely a strategy looking out for the sellers. It's nothing that's meant to be unethical or anything. It's just salesmanship, and it's not necessarily. These conversations are difficult when we are on the listing side and we try to tell our clients, like, I don't necessarily do this unless the strategy calls for it, but trying to tell your client, like, look, I know you're looking to get 425 for this house, but let's list it at 375. That's not an easy conversation, because they're like, well, what are you, crazy? What if someone offers 375? Do we have to take it? No, but you probably should. That's how it works. But if you get multiple bids because more people come to look at it, it hits more people's saved searches. That's the big thing. Everyone that's got a saved search in Zillow or the MLS, it's going to hit their search and they're going to come to the house, whereas they might not. People that didn't think they had the money, even when we bought our personal house, we had a price point in mind, and then we saw a house slightly over it, and guess what? If you really want to make it happen, you can maneuver some stuff around that maybe, or spend some money you weren't planning on spending just to get the house you want. That's what most people do. So there is some merit to that strategy. So pretty conventional house here that was just listed low. I think of the ones we've looked at, though, this would be the only one that really falls into that category. I will note here again, and this is actually interesting, I'm learning something here, is that this house is again being sold as is. So I think what's happening here is these particular listings, the agents chose, or I shouldn't say the agents, I should say the sellers chose to list it as is. And because this market is so good, they listed it as a price they thought as is, this would be the price. And the market disagreed and came in and said, nope, it's actually higher. Can't argue with the market. If someone's willing to pay it, then, it is what it is. Another thing I wanted to point out was, everyone's offering cash. That's another popular talking point. So I'm counting at the last 38 sales in Pittstown over the last year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cash deals. 5. So, a little over 10%. Again, not a good talking point. Let's look at the price points on some of these cash deals. I'm going to bring this column over. Now, Pittstown is a very unique market. If I did this activity again for, let's say, East Brunswick, it would be very different results here. So again, this is why I recommend a buyer's consultation. If you're going to use me to buy a house, we can talk about your market. I'm just doing this because I actually did this earlier today for one of my clients. So, and it's interesting. I think it's interesting. This is kind of my wheelhouse, and I'm interested in this kind of stuff. I'm a business background guy, so to me, these numbers are fairly interesting. So on the cash deals, one was $850,000. Listen, if you're up against a bid for an $850,000 house in all cash, and you have a mortgage, you're probably going to lose. But as you can see, that is not very common. Listen, as a realtor, if I get someone that comes to me and says, I want to buy an $850,000 house, and I say, oh, did you get your pre-approval? No, we're actually going to be using cash. That's like ching ching. That's payday, because, all right, well, I can definitely get you a house with those terms. That's like, for us, that's a treat. One of the other ones that was cash, $2.26 million. Listen, the person buying a $2.26 million house, they have resources and they are able to come up with that cash. Great for them. $490,000, $650,000. Those are the cash deals. So all over the spectrum as far as price. Surprisingly, most of them at the higher price. That's interesting. Other than that, mostly conventional. We had one private deal. That's it though. That's it on the lending. So let's look for what went under. Let's take a look at a few of those. These are always pretty interesting too. And you'll also see I have days on market here, average days on market. Let's look at the average. This is basically the days it went from active to under contract. And you have to build into that we have a New Jersey attorney review, which is generally about a week, but can be, depending on if there's terms to be worked out and stuff, it could be up to 10 days. So you basically can add that onto here, or subtract it from the number, I should say. So again, if it's, it says 18 days on the market, you can probably assume that you can subtract 7 for attorney review. So really it was, but to get an accepted offer was 11 days. So the average, and I see a few outliers here. So that number, let me try this again without the outliers, because the outliers on as is homes or something. Like there's one on here that was on the market for almost 2 years. That's obviously going to throw our number off. So let me do this. Let me take those outliers out. That is definitely not a common scenario. So, I'm just going to scan down the list here. We got 36 days, 40 days, 30 days, 99 days, 15 days, 31 days, 11 days, 65, 12, 21, 52, 29, 27, 15, 18. But we don't have so if I saw 8s, 9s, that means they got an offer, accepted offer on the first day it was on the market, which is what people are saying all the time. It's just not a fact out here in Hunterdon. There's a couple. There's one here. This was a conventional deal. They got exactly asking price of $499.9. It was on the market for 11 days, which probably means about 4 days before they had an accepted offer. I'm sure it's a beautiful house. Okay. Another thing that's interesting here is a conversation I have with my sellers all the time. So if you're selling a house, there's always this question of what should the buyer's compensation be? Because essentially that comes out of the, when we do a net sheet and tell people what it's going to cost them to sell their house, we talk about what they should be compensating the buying agent. And I will say that most commonly in Hunterdon, certainly, but largely in other parts of New Jersey as well, it's 2.5% is going to be the majority of them. So I'm looking at this in Hunterdon County. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of 38 are not 2.5%. Why wouldn't something be 2.5%? Well, 2 reasons. Number one, it could be lower because they went with a discount brokerage and they just aren't paying a lot of commission. I think, in my opinion, once you go below the, prevailing rate, which in this case is 2.5%, you're putting yourself at risk of realtors seeing that and being like, oh God, it's only 2%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine taking a 20% cut on your commission or your paycheck, because that's essentially what's happening. And a lot of times they're, houses that are distressed and the transaction is actually more difficult. So I always caution my sellers. By the way, realtors should not do that. If they have a buyer's agreement with their buyers, it can be worked out in other ways, or they just do it for the 2%. I've done it for 2%. It's not great, but you do it. You do what you have to do for your clients. And if you hadn't had that conversation ahead of time with your clients of what to do if it is listed at 2%, that's kind of on you. And you should definitely be showing them that house. So an ethical realtor would never not show that house because it's listed at 2%. I'm just saying, for a seller, don't take that risk, because I think it will affect your showings. I think you will have realtors who are handpicking homes for their clients and see that 2% and saying, maybe I won't show that one right away. A little bit of an ethical question there on the buying agent's part, but don't give them that opportunity. Just do what everyone else is doing and do 2.5%. That being said, you can do whatever you want. I'm not saying this that you should or shouldn't. It's a conversation that largely, is a bit controversial. I'm just telling you the numbers that out of 38 listings sold in the last year in Pittstown, 32 of them were compensating a buyer's agent of 2.5. If you're going to step outside of that kind of norm, I think you should have a reason for it, and you should know what the risk is. And I'm telling you, the risk of listing at 2% to a buyer's agent is you might get less showings. There are a few in here that are 3%, and I think that's an interesting strategy. I personally do not do it. But I think it's a good strategy because I will tell you, as a buying agent, when I'm looking at a house, it's the opposite effect. I see that 3%. I'm like, I wonder if my buyers would like this. Certainly, it's nice for me. I get a nice little bump, and I think it's just a nice kind of bonus that's built in there. So make people feel good about showing the listing. Again, it really shouldn't affect the buying agent. It doesn't necessarily affect me. I'm happy when I see it. But certainly can't argue that I'm going to feel bad about it. Sometimes when we see the 3%, which actually makes sense, is because it is a distressed property. Now, I just said that's a lot of times what the 2% ones are, but that's because they're using a discount brokerage or they're working through the bank or something like that. But doing a 3% on a distressed property is an interesting strategy because it's acknowledging that the buyer's agent is probably going to have to do more work because it's going to be complicated. And offering that 3% is a really nice way to do business. Is saying, hey, I acknowledge you're probably going to have your hands full on this one. You got to get all the certifications and everything else on your own. Let me kick you the 3%. Smart move by sellers to do that. All right. So let's see here. Let's take a look at some of the ones that went under asking. Well, now here's a big one. I got to know out of morbid curiosity on this one. Negative 425,000. 425,000 over asking. Now I see it was on the market for a very long time, over 6 months. I have a feeling this is a very complicated home. Looks to me like it's 1 bedroom. Let's see what's going on here. This has got to be something that's definitely an outlier. Again, just out of curiosity, let's see what we're looking at here. And I'm going to do this in real time with you. I'm literally just going to remove some of these outliers and let's see what it does to our number. All right, so this is land. So, there's nothing here. There might be some little there is some structure. It's a horse facility with an apartment, essentially. Beautiful facility. Obviously, way less buyers, not only for the price point, but it's a horse facility. Here's your living quarters, I guess. Oh, there's horse. Must have 1 bedroom somewhere. So very cool, but you can understand why this might not go for 1.9 million. All right, so there's our outlier. So let me strip out the outliers. Let's see what it does to our numbers. Let's certainly take out that one. And this one's 149,000 under asking. Let's see what's going on there. Notice 3% buyer's compensation. So let's see, this might have been something that was unique. And I still see quite a few people on, so thanks for hanging on with me. That's very nice of those of you who are here. 4 Locust Grove Road. Yeah, interesting. So, you got kind of a farmhouse style here, definitely older, mix of, some updates and some farmhouse style stuff. Fair to say someone would want to come in and make some updates. Very cool. But, I'll tell you, there's just less buyers for this type of house. I always question the younger generations. Are they even still interested in these older houses? It actually wasn't on the market super long. So this could have been an example of someone needing to get out and they got a decent enough offer and it was enough for them that they're just like, all right, good enough. We'll go with it. Because it was only on the market for about 20 days. And they took 149 under asking. So, to say these things never happen is definitely not true. All right, let's go ahead and strip that one out. This one was 80 grand over asking. Let's see what that looks like. All right. And thank you all for hanging in. I still see quite a few people on. Really appreciate that. And I keep looking because I'm like, this has got to be relatively boring. So, I mean, pretty conventional home here. I don't see anything crazy. Yeah, I'm even reluctant to strip out the outliers because I'm looking at the outliers. I'm like, they're just one-off situations on the market for 2 weeks. Listed at 645, sold for 725. They did have a multiple offer situation. Someone fell in love with the house. Conventional mortgage, it wasn't cash. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes someone decides it was worth more and they go with it. So I'm kind of reluctant to strip out the outliers because they're all valid stories. So if I strip out, we had that one big one that I stripped out. And there's probably a few other here that are so unique that I probably should strip them out. All right, so let's just do it for the sake of seeing what happens. I'm going to strip out that 96,000 one. That was kind of a interesting one. And I'm going to strip out, this was that other as is. I'm going to strip out those two as is. And that puts us at an average closing price of 5,000 over asking. So, there you go. There's your talking point, kind of dissected and debunked, so to say. So all of these things have to be sussed out. You can't go with those kind of talking points. This market has never been more complicated with the interest rate situation, the housing shortage, the pilgrimage to Hunterdon County. That's a real thing. A good portion of my clients are from New York and Eastern New Jersey and great people. And they're looking to come out here and get all the house they want compared to where they're coming from, and you're coming from Union County with, you sell your $850,000 house, you'll basically buy a mansion in Hunterdon County for that money. So, with all of those things happening, you can't sum this market up in like kind of a hot take comment. It's just way more complicated than that. That's why I have buyer's consultations, is talk to me about what you're looking for. If you have concerns like that, let's do this activity for whatever town you're looking in. A lot of people are always saying, well, okay, they have multiple offers now. What should we do? Well, let's take a look at the comps. Obviously, that's the most obvious thing, and not everyone does it, but you certainly want to do it. Because that's really going to educate you as to what's safe to offer. You got to worry about that appraisal gap. And an appraisal gap, for those of you that don't know, and this is going to be the super dumbed down version, but and this is something you should talk to your lender about, not me necessarily. I can give you the dumbed down version. I'll let the lender tell you the complicated version. But essentially, if you put an offer in on $1 million house, let's use more realistic numbers. You put an offer in on a $500,000 house, and it appraises for $400,000. The bank has a threshold as to how much they're going to lend you. And when they hear it's only worth $400,000 and you're only putting, say, 10% down, they're not going to lend you $450,000 on a house that's only worth $400,000, because what if you just stop making your payments? Then they're going to be out $50,000. In essence, that's what an appraisal gap is. So when that comes up in the mortgage process, the appraisal is part of the buying process, and the appraiser comes back and says, I'm sorry, but you underappraised by $100,000. Everyone involved in the deal has to come back to the negotiating table. This is not the buyer's problem. It's everyone's problem. The buyer and the seller have to come to a new agreement of what they're going to do in light of this situation. Now, the way we handled this like 2.5 years ago, and by the way, over the past 3 years, I've had this happen to me. Again, 100 homes sold. I've had this happen to me 2 times. It is not very common. That includes all of the times I went way over asking price or had listings go way over asking price. They appraised. One of the questions that appraisers are asking now is, were there multiple offers? Because that speaks to the market value of the house, which is very much a factor in this. So back in the day, 2.5 years ago, if it was 100,000 short, it's not going to be 100,000 short. It's going to be 10,000 short. If it's 10,000 short on the appraisal, buyer and seller come back to the negotiating table. Generally, the way it would work is the seller would say, all right, we acknowledge it. We'll take $5,000 less. In other words, knock the sales price down $5,000. And on the buyer side, they will come up 5,000. Meet in the middle. Everyone is relatively happy. That 5,000 from the buyer has to be cash because, again, the bank has said, we're not lending you all that money. The house is not worth that much. So you need to come up with the cash. This is a super dumbed down version of what an appraisal gap is, to repeat it. And if you really want a professional version, talk to your lender. I'll stay in my lane on this one. But in a nutshell, that's what an appraisal gap is. Nowadays, again, to that kind of hot take of everything's 100,000 over asking. 100,000 is a funny number because it comes up a lot in real estate because I've made this joke with colleagues many times, but like if you show a house that needs work, everyone says $100,000. It doesn't matter if it just needs a kitchen or if it needs all sorts of work. The number is always $100,000. Everyone always says, oh, this place needs like $100,000 worth of work. And a lot of times I'm like, well, I think it probably needs $50,000 worth of work, right? It needs a new kitchen for, top of the line, do what you want kitchen for 40 grand. It's not 100. And sometimes buyers agents are saying that to me as a listing agent, like, oh, it's a great house, but it needs like $100,000 worth of work. And I'm like, what's on that list of the 100,000? Well, it needs, a bathroom and floors. All right. So what's that? 35 grand. That $100,000 is a very funny number, but if people are coming in offering 100,000 over asking, my first question to them as a listing agent is, what are you going to do when it inevitably does not appraise for 100,000 over asking? What's the plan? Because my sellers are not looking to get back to the negotiating table. And sometimes that answer is, well, we think it'll be fine, which is we don't have a plan. We don't have any extra money. We don't intend to pay for that gap. And we'll figure it out at the negotiating table. Do you think sellers want to hear that nowadays? That is why 100,000 over asking is not getting accepted unless they address it in their offer. And that is a big differentiator there. When you hear someone say, I know people that offered 100,000 over asking and they still did not get the house. Of course they didn't, because the listing agent was smart enough to know it's never going to appraise for that amount. And the people had no extra money. In a lot of cases, they're putting like 3.5% down on an FHA loan and not addressing the appraisal gap. I mean, that deal's not going to close in that state. It's going to have to be renegotiated, and sellers don't want to deal with that. So again, these talking points are very complicated. So here's our Pittstown example. I wanted to pick Pittstown not only because I did this earlier today when a client asked me to take a look, but I wanted to pick Pittstown because Pittstown is a truly unique market. If you don't know Pittstown, which I'm guessing some of you watching this do, and some of you don't, I can't see who's watching because, again, as I always point out, this is broadcast all over the place, YouTube, Facebook, multiple Facebook groups. And I actually, from my view, I can't see everyone that's watching. But if you don't know Pittstown, it's a relatively rural area with the unique thing that it's 10 minutes from two nearby, for Hunterdon County, fairly, significant towns in that they have stores. This must sound like, country bumpkin stuff to people that don't know these areas, but Pittstown is between our county seat and another town, Clinton. Both of those places have food stores and, restaurants and everything else. So it's a popular destination, and that's 10 minutes from both of those locations, but it's also very rural. The minimum, with a few exceptions, the minimum acre size is 3. There are some legacy things that are under 3 acres, but on up to, I'm looking at these listings right now, 290 acres. So it's a very rural place. It is obviously going to be very unique. A lot of people go to look at properties in Pittstown, and we get there and they're like, well, where's the neighborhood? And I'm like, this ain't that kind of place. We don't have a neighborhood. We do have some neighborhoods in Pittstown, but that's not the norm. So I wanted to talk about a unique market because wherever you're looking, you should ask this question: does this pertain to the market I'm looking in? If you say Reddington Township in Hunterdon, your conversation is going to be closer to the one that we were talking about, that everything's going for crazy money. So it depends on all these things. So I think this is a good activity. If you want me to do this with you where you're looking, give me a call, shoot me a message or a text or all my contact info is on all these broadcasts. You can send me a personal message, YouTube comment, phone call, text message. My phone number is on the bottom of this. I'll stop sharing my screen so you can see that full number. And I'll be happy to, do this for you. It's relatively easy for me to do this. We dug in quite a bit here and looked at the individual listings and whatnot, but this is a relatively easy activity. I just pulled these numbers right out of the MLS and put them in an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can manipulate them however you want and get to the root of the conversation. So, okay, well, I am over an hour, which is way more than I usually like to do. But I hope this was semi-interesting to people. Calm people down. We're still getting offers accepted. Things are definitely different, but you want to find an agent that's adapted to how things are different. I try not to toot my own horn too much in these broadcasts, but I've adapted. I'm very, very strategic about how my offers get submitted and the homework and the due diligence we do up until the time that we pick a price that we're putting on the contract that we're submitting. I am very careful in how I get the confidence of the listing agent, and it's all on the up and up. I am all over my transactions. I'm on top of things. I don't miss deadlines. I don't let things fall apart. I coach my clients properly so that there's no surprises along the way. If a client's gonna, not be coached, they're asking for things like, the siding's faded or the roof is not brand new or the AC is not the model I like. Well, guess what? You can't negotiate for those things in this market. It's a seller's market. So they're just going to say no. And they could get so upset that they just say, we're out. So things like that generally don't happen under my watch. And it's fine. I'm looking out for my buyers. And I tell them sometimes, look, you can ask for that if you want. You're probably going to lose the house. And that does happen all the time. And ultimately, it's the buyer's decision. It's not my decision. I'm just there to advise them. So if you're looking to work with someone that has all those things, is very strategic and will tell it like it is, not sugarcoat things. I will be very transparent with you. It's not meant to be an ego thing. It's not meant to be a know-it-all. It's just meant to be transparent. So you know exactly what's going to happen. And it's based on my experience. So if that's something that you think is appealing, then, we're probably a good match. And references are available. As I said earlier, I always say references are available. No one ever calls them, but they are available if you want to talk to them. But minimally, just Google my name, Craig Metz, Realtor, and you can read all the reviews you want. So, all right. So that's about it. I'm going to pack it up and get back to my family and kick the weekend off. So I hope everyone is happy and healthy. Stay safe out there. Take care of each other. If you need my help, feel free to reach out. Doesn't matter if you're not planning to buy or sell anytime soon. You just want to, have a question or anything. Listen, I love to talk about this stuff. So, look me up. All right. Take care, everyone. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.